From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. I'm Jason Tenori, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, welcome back. Dr. Jason here, Dental Lighthouse Podcast. Super excited about my guest today. And his name will remain anonymous. Why is that? Because we're going to have a super granular, tactical, philosophical, visionary whiteboard conversation on all things partnership. We're going to talk specifically about his situation and just in an effort to kind of protect what he's built and everything that he's worked towards. I just don't want people out there knowing who he is and what state he's from and stuff like that. But rest assured that this is one of the most honest guys that I know. We have a history of doing some coaching in the past, and he has taken just a hair of the advice I've given him, and he's blown up. And you know, now he's reached the different ceiling of complexity. He's got that success tax, as we've talked about, and problems that 5 years ago we wish we had, and now we're getting slapped in the face with them. So I'm excited to have him on the show. I'm excited to kind of unpack what he's dealing with, and mostly I'm excited about maybe giving him a little bit of wisdom to help collapse time, but at the same time, for all of our listeners, sharing this perspective with you, because the reality is you're either coming into this situation, you're in the middle of this situation, or you've dealt with this situation, and it can help you in some capacity. So without further ado, we're going to call you Dr. X. Dr. X, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks so much for having me. I have no doubt that you're going to be able to add so much value to my life as you already have. So I'm excited just to learn from you.
So Dr. X, let's give a little bit of context, maybe the last few years, kind of where we started, where we're at, just kind of set the stage, and then we can start to digest some of the questions that you have.
For sure. So we shared a little bit earlier, but I started as a very small out-of-network fee-for-service style of practice, 5 operatories, without getting into too much detail. Over the course of about 2 years, we've grown from a single doctor location, doing around 2.5 to 2.7. So now we've got 3 doctors, and we're on track to do somewhere between 6 to 6.5 and 12 operatories now. And as you mentioned, it brings on a whole different level of complexity that you and I have talked about through different iterations and stages and ceilings that I've bumped into. But one of the things I'm bumping up into now is learning to value the providers that we have on a level that I wasn't prepared for. For whatever reason, I just believed an associate would be an associate, and that partnership in this current location probably never would exist because it's my baby, right? And now I'm learning that the part of the reason that we got here is because providers were willing to be themselves and add to the group as we grew, and losing them would actually be really detrimental to the business. And so I, in full transparency, have some hesitancies with partnerships. I'm not quite sure what they should look like. I'm not quite sure what they look like in my situation. And also not knowing what the future may hold for us. I feel like I'm in this limbo where I want to protect the golden goose, but I also know that there's a world in which the current office isn't the golden goose. There's a chance that we could grow into something much bigger. I also do believe that owning a smaller portion of a bigger pie is actually a better business move. But in my heart, I struggle to accept that. And so, like you said, some of this may be philosophical in nature, but I would love just to hear maybe back when you started to venture into this world, that you grew a business that maybe you believed is bigger than you ever thought. And you started to have to think about what partnership would look like in RSU models. And if you have an associate that maybe an RSU model isn't the right fit, like they really do want ownership, and even having conversations of saying, hey, do you want money or do you want responsibility? And the answer is actually responsibility. Uh, that's not necessarily a answer I was prepared for.
Yeah, no doubt, no
And
doubt.
so, yeah,
Um, love it. I love the context, and I think we can do a lot with that. And I have so many thoughts here based on mistakes I've made and a few successes that I've had along the way. Just for our listeners at home, let me kind of set the stage. Um, I think what we're going to end up talking about is two partnership structures. There's hundreds, right? But the two that I'm most familiar with are the RSU model, or what we'll call an earned equity model. And for those of you guys that are not familiar with that, it's basically a model where the associate doesn't have a buy-in per se. The office creates a hurdle for that associate, typically an adjusted production hurdle or a collections hurdle, whatever you pay on. And for every dollar that the provider goes above that hurdle, they earn equity. So just to
mm-hmm.
keep the math simple, let's say the hurdle's 800,000 in a year, the doctor ends up doing 1 million. That's a $200,000 delta. In our world, 20% of that delta is what they earn in equity. So 20% of 200 grand is $40,000. So now the associate has earned $40,000 in equity in the business. This is real equity. It's shares that ultimately vest over time. Everything's on the up and up. Everything's legal.
Mm-hmm.
The other model that we'll probably talk about is more of a buy-in model, right? So where there's an evaluation of the practice, we decide what percentage of the equity we're willing to let go of or willing to sell. The associate either writes a check for that, or there's seller financing, or there's, again, there are a bunch of different ways to do it. And typically with that model, there's additional responsibilities associated with the partnership beyond the chair. So we expect the provider to still produce dentistry at a rate similar to what they were producing, but we also expect the provider to wear additional hats in the organization. It could be chief clinical director, it could be director of operations, it could be business development, it could be recruiting, it could be the CEO. And that is a model that is also very successful if everything is lined up correctly, if expectations are managed correctly, and things like that. So, Dr. X, do you feel like those are? Did I explain it well from your perspective of like the two things that we're really talking about here?
For sure.
Okay.
And part of the, and I've done my research, listened to the podcasts, done the things that I would say I'm moderately educated in both of these scenarios. And I think both would be great. My problem is I've gotten skilled at making deals, and, my vision could work for both. And so I love where this is going, is like, I may have one associate that might be a better buy-in type of partner, whereas another associate may be an RSU model. Um, so yeah, I'd love to dive more into like how that's worked in your model and if you're doing both, but also how I can have this conversation with specifically one of the associates that we have that I think would be a better buy-in type partner, just because of the conversations we've had, while also not letting them own the conversation, because I could let, like, a second location would work as a partnership. An RSU would work. There's so many things that would work, but I also
Yeah.
want to be that visionary, casting the vision for what I believe our organization is, versus letting he or she lead that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And knowing you the way I know you, you're not making that decision because you feel like you're better educated than anyone else in the room. I mean, you're making that decision, and you have the right to make that decision because you are the one that got it to where it is,
Right.
and you want to be the one that takes it to where it goes next. I mean, with some help, but you need to
Mm-hmm.
be the captain, for lack of a better term. So I
Well,
totally,
and I completely and implicitly believe in this other person. Like,
yeah,
even to the point to where if the option was, hey, I want to own my own thing even in a different city, I would back him to do that. You know what I mean?
yeah, 100%. And we can talk about another option that I didn't just roll out that I've done in the past that
Mm-hmm.
might fit that scenario. First thing I want to say, just to clear up some things, is you can have both, right?
Mm.
And I have done both. So with the RSU model, at the end of the day, you're basically looking at your EBITDA, you're deciding how many shares are outstanding, and you're assigning a price per share, right?
Right.
That's how it works. Now, you can have the shares be earned by the doctors through this hurdle that we've talked about, or you can have the shares be sold to a
Mm-hmm.
doctor. So the I don't think you need to overcomplicate it and have two particular models. You could use an RSU model, and part of that model is, okay, I'm going to sell 10% of my shares to this associate that you have a lot of faith in. So you can use
Mm-hmm.
the same model and accomplish both. Couple couple things to think about. Red flags, so to speak. Um, you have to decide early on, and you can always change your mind, but you have to decide early on what level are you willing to get diluted to. And I
Mm-hmm.
think you referenced maybe before we hit record that, or maybe it was after. I can't remember. You know, the 50-year-old
Mm-hmm.
mind is a struggle.
I don't
Um,
remember either.
am I willing to own a smaller percentage in a bigger piece, right?
Yeah.
So the way that our contracts are currently set up, I cannot get diluted beyond 20%. So I will always own 80%. I should say always, but right now, as it stands up, I will own a minimum of 80% of the organization. Now, if we continue to grow like we're growing, and I want to continue to offer earned equity shares to providers, I'm going to have to decide if I want to change that
Change that.
80% to say 75 or 70.
Sure.
And again, to your point, like we're getting to the size where I have to check my ego and not worry about the percentage, but worry about the value of
Mm-hmm.
that percentage. So would I rather own 70% of a company that's worth, 50 million, or would I rather own 80% of a company that's worth 10?
Right.
Right. So it's just like, it's math, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say from an RSU perspective is I feel like it's a beautiful model for partnership for associates who want to be partner in name only,
That's right.
who don't want additional responsibilities, who want to be, our criteria is a good core value fit, a good
Mm-hmm.
leader, someone that the team can rely on, but we're not asking this person to go to another office and mentor people. We're not asking this
Mm-hmm.
person to work on payroll. We're not asking this person to develop a system of calibration amongst the hygienists. We're just asking them to come in, do good dentistry, be a role model, and that's all I need of them.
Yeah.
It's a really good, I hate this term, but it's relevant here. It's a really good golden handcuff
Yeah.
model because they are leaving some significant equity on the table if they decide to jump in most situations, this prospective partner ends up being the chief clinical officer. That's not
Right.
to suggest that that's what your situation is going to be, but in most of the situation, that's who it ends up being. And that does take a lot of responsibility off the founder's plate because now they
Mm-hmm.
can focus more on business development. They can focus on maximizing EBITDA. They can focus on capturing market share, how to drive more new patients, leadership development, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So based on let's just hit the pause button here. Based on that context, any questions or concerns that you have up until this point?
No, that makes total sense. And that's kind of what's gotten me to this point is knowing that this individual is a very heady person, and I think would understand the RSU model pretty quickly. And not that it's a bad model, but I think that he would want more. He would want more responsibility, which is the words that he's used. And I do believe he would be a great chief clinical officer. Like we're very much aligned in what he wants to do is also what I want to do. He's just some years behind me, right?
Fair, fair.
And so if what I'm learning more and more, and even so after a conversation we had not too long ago was like, what gets me fired up in the morning is not anymore coming in and doing dentistry. In fact, sometimes I'm just annoyed that I'm even sitting there with the patient, right? But like what gets me fired up is knowing if I had the flexibility to come in and mentor and coach and teach, or be the true visionary of the business to where I can sit with our director of operations and brainstorm and think.
Yeah.
And take us to the next level. But that's just so different than what I've done for the past, 5 or 6 years. For the past 5 or 6 years, it's how much can I clinically produce?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was at that same crossroads. And as you know, I haven't done clinical dentistry in almost 2 years now. And I love it because I do spend literally 15 to 30 minutes every day with my operations person talking about new offices and new acquisitions and how do we grow this particular office's hygiene department and how do we get case acceptance higher in this particular office. And I love it. And I just feel like I can serve more people through other people's hands than I can at the chair doing molar endo or placing an implant or stuff like that.
Yeah.
Not to kind of go off a tangent here, but the dilemma, and I know you're extremely aware of this, but for our listeners, the dilemma for people listening who want to follow that path, it's known as the founder's dilemma, right? So you need to be able to have a certain size business and you need to be able to have a certain level of profitability to be able to slowly but surely phase out of clinical dentistry, yet still have the same personal income to allow your family to live the way that they have afforded to live. Edison Clean, our good friend, uses the term 3 and free. And I found that to be true in certain situations and untrue in others. But what he's basically saying there is run a profitable business, have 3 full-time associates that are producing decent dentistry, and the organization should spit off enough profit to support you to not be a practitioner. And if I'm understanding you correctly, that's kind of where you're trying to vision cast. Is that safe to say?
For sure. Yeah. I think long term, that would be what would be sustainable for me. I don't think doing what I'm currently doing is necessarily sustainable for the next 20 years. But I do think if I got to that point, and it's not about exiting the chair, it's about just doing something that's more fulfilling for me.
And make more of an impact.
Right.
Like,
right.
Yeah. I mean, you probably, when you're clinical, you're probably producing $150,000 to $200,000 a month, which is it's significant, but you could have so much more of an impact if you're touching multiple providers, multiple leaders, and just be able to just produce so much more revenue, serve so many more people through other people's hands under your mentorship, as opposed to you at the chair.
Yeah. Walk me through, if you can, go back to when maybe you felt similar to me of starting to think about giving, I hate the word giving, associates earning equity or buying equity, and what mentally you had to, like the hurdles you had to get over, because that may be my biggest problem is just myself. Like how do I get past myself and believe that like owning, not just say it, but believe that owning a smaller piece of a bigger pie is better. You know what I mean? Like it sounds good on paper, but sometimes it's harder to actually believe it in your heart before you've lived it.
Yeah. I'll take you back to even before then. And I think the year was maybe 2010, where, and it's all ego, right? Where I had my first really well-established associate, a young lady who was killing it, great following, don't quote me on the numbers, but was probably doing $1 million to $1.5 million on her own. wanted to buy in, and very similar to the reservations that you're kind of expressing to me, it was my baby, and I was
Hmm.
so protective of it that I never said no, but intentionally dragged my feet,
Hmm.
almost hoping that she would go away. And when I say go away, like still stay here as a full-time associate and produce, but the ask would go away.
Yeah.
Um, and she was persistent. And I finally had to have a come to Jesus conversation, both with her and myself, and say, I'm just not ready. I'm just not
Yeah.
ready to give up 25%. But I really wanted to continue to work with this young lady. So we actually developed a franchise agreement. So what we did was we found a location to do another startup. It's about 20 miles away. And I gave her, I shouldn't say gave, but I allowed some staff members to go there.
Hmm.
She had access to all the branding, all the systems, all the marketing.
Yep.
I seller financed the startup through a very manageable interest rate that didn't include like tons of closing costs and red tape and all the bank
Hmm.
bureaucracy. And then I charged her a percentage of revenue like a franchise would. I
Hmm.
believe it was 8% of
Hmm.
revenue. And it was wildly successful on both ends, right? She turned that startup into $1 million practice in year two. She hit the ground running. We would funnel patients to her that were in that geographic area that were coming to my flagship. And it was nice to have these revenue checks come in every single month. So we did that for 5 years. It was a 5 year agreement, and she had the ability to re-up if she wanted at a lower percentage. And she made the right decision after 5 years. And she's like, I don't need you anymore. And
Right.
I mean, it was bittersweet, but she was right. I mean, I would have made the same decision if I was in her situation.
Hmm.
And now she's 20 miles down the road. I don't talk to her all that much anymore, but she's wildly successful.
Right.
Right. So that could be an option for you if you really want to be protective of what you have. The disadvantage of that is I no longer have a relationship with her. Right. So
Yeah.
we ended up going our separate ways, mainly because I wasn't ready um, to take on a partner. I wasn't ready to kind of go down that road. It sounds to me like you're a little bit more receptive to it, a little bit further along.
Yeah.
Um, so you could entertain some type of model like that. But uh, if I were in your position, if I'm understanding you correctly, more so the traditional partnership model, if you can get past the idea of sharing,
Hmm.
might be a better direction for you to go in.
Yeah.
Especially if we're talking about, I'm just going to call them type A doctors. You're a type A
Yep.
doctor. I'm a type A doctor. This guy sounds like he's a type A doctor. He's
Yep.
driven. He could do it himself if he really
Hmm.
wanted to. I want to partner with those people as long as their core value fits.
Right.
And it just comes down to me having a level of trust and saying, this is the right guy, and he is going to make my life easier, and he is going to help scale and get to this vision that I'm ultimately imagining quicker than I could get there by myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got to stop acting like a 3-year old, not wanting to share my toys.
Well,
um,
you spent a lot of time, money, sweat, and tears like
for sure.
developing those toys. So I totally get it.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like this bumps into the other idea that I've flown past you in the past is just like why part of the reason I'm nervous is I just hear you don't hear so much about like great partnerships. You always hear about the divorce and the thing that didn't work out. And same kind of is true with practices, like owning multiple practices, right? So in my head, I see no reason why I couldn't do that. There's a lot of reasons I haven't. I think taking my eye off the ball and building one single location that runs like a Humvee is like the best thing I could do right now. But I think part of the reason I might be skittish from a partnership is just I do have friends and I have people that do have partnerships and it works great. I worry that I'll make the mistake of building the wrong deal, the wrong incentives, and regretting the decision. And a lot of that, again, I think can be fleshed out by having great mentors and people to talk to like yourself. But also just being open with the other person and letting them know that like this is kind of an experiment. And I think he would be so open to that conversation. I'm fearful of always having those conversations,
Fair.
afraid that I would say the wrong thing or chase him off or present it in a way that's not as attractive as maybe it really is. Again, a lot of this stuff is me problems, but
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. So let's assume that we are going to entertain the idea of, and I'll just throw out numbers here. You and I haven't really talked about it, but let's
mm,
assume this is the guy and we want to be transparent with him. We want to offer him 25% equity. And with that 25% equity comes the wearing the hat of chief clinical officer and everything that's involved with that. We could talk about KPIs and we could talk about metrics and stuff like that. And then let's also assume that you have a vision to grow significantly. So you are going to need some type of profits interest RSU model to offer partnership to other associates that are just not wired type A, like the two of us, like this
mhm,
prospective 25% partner. The the next thing that we have to figure out is how are we going to scale, right?
mhm.
So the RSU model only works if you're growing.
That's right.
If you're plateaued or if you're growing at say 5%, then these associates are earning equity, but the EBITDA of the business is not growing. So you are
Mhm.
just getting diluted
Right.
and not even realizing it. So I usually tell prospective clients, current coaching clients that have this RSU conversation, at a minimum, you need to be trying to grow 15% year over year. We
Mhm.
strive for 20, and 15 to 20% year over year may sound extremely reasonable to you, or it may
Mhm.
sound like, oh my gosh, that's not something that I want to take on. So in an effort to ask yourself, are you going to entertain the RSU model? I think that's one of the questions that you have to kind of ask yourself. Does your vision mean growing 15 to 20% year over year? If it does, I think the next question is, does that mean multiple location or does that mean transitioning the flagship into, assuming that you're constrained by your four walls right now, does it mean transitioning the flagship into a bigger facility?
Yeah.
I constantly get asked, if you could do it over again, what would you change? And the number one thing I would change by far is I would maximize my flagship um, exponentially before I
Mhm.
considered a second location.
Yep.
Um, Now, when I say maximize my flagship, I'm talking 20, 25, 30 ops, right?
Mhm.
And I don't know if you have I don't know if you agree with that mindset or if you have the facility capacity to do something like that, but everything is just so much easier when it's under one roof.
Mhm.
And setting up the key players to support a business that size, HR, IT, marketing, um, I, as I was growing second, third, fourth, fifth locations, and those things were needed, now I'm already strung out. Now I'm like,
Right.
I really need an HR department. And now I had this HR person bouncing all over the place. Well, again, in retrospect, if I would have built a 30 operatory practice and brought in IT and HR and operations and marketing, and we were all in the same building all the time, it would have been
Mhm.
so much easier to scale versus what I did now. So
Yeah.
again, I'll hit pause here and kind of go back to you. What are your growth goals?
Yeah.
And are you forced to do multiple location or would you consider, a giant flagship and where are you at with that?
Totally. So unfortunately, a year and a half ago, I did what I thought was going to be that big, massive build out and spent significant money. And we've already grown into the space by the grace of God, which is great. But I'm also like, how did that happen?
In
um,
a year and a half. Isn't that
yeah,
crazy? It's
it's
so
nuts. Like you go
crazy.
from 5 ops to what could be 14, and now we're like, all right, we got to turn the photo studio into another op and figure out a new space for the. I'm like, this wasn't supposed to happen yet, but here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I had to put my foot down on what would actually be feasible with where I'm located, owning uh, owning a building that could house something like you're talking about, a 25 to 30 op facility, would, not to say that it couldn't happen, but it would be on a totally different financial level than I ever dreamed of.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And
a
that's
lot
just
of,
based on that's just based on the demographics of the city that you're in, right?
right, right.
Okay, so you're
Yeah.
in an urban area. That type of real estate is not
Yeah, like
easily
the
available.
building I just developed was quite literally was, it used to be a zone de erotica. Like it was like a rundown, like it had graffiti on the walls, and it was the only building that I I said, if that ever goes for sale in my location, that's the only building that might sell for less than 2 million. Whereas most everything else are 5 to 10 story office spaces that would sell
Yeah,
for
yeah,
much more. And so doing something like that could be done, but it would probably have to be in a suburb. But what I think, if I could vision cast 5 years ahead, we've got a dental school in our city. So it may be presumptuous to say that associates abound, but I do think like I have the opportunity of going and teaching a class there every year. Um, and I get to know some of these people and they want to come shadow, and it gives me opportunity to recruit some of these associates. That's how I've found the two associates I have. And if I had to put my finger on it, it would be getting associates to come into our office to be able to maximize our current location with associates. And then from there, have 1 to 2 of them really bought into this location, but then use this as a breeding ground to then send them out and open a location 15, 20 minutes away, or even an hour away, or even 2 hours away, to where they've been integrated into our culture and our organization, but they also still have that drive to want to build and create. I think that could be really interesting to young dentists, especially who are coming out with more debt than they've ever experienced previously, but also to be able to roll, instead of doing like what you did with the franchise model. What I've envisioned is more so build the location with them, give them sweat equity, and then give them the option at a certain revenue number to either buy me out as the partner, or roll their equity into the flagship or the group, so that should a sale come, they can benefit in the sale. That's kind of the vision that if I had to say today, that's where we're headed, that's what I would say.
yeah. And I love that model. And that's kind of what we do now. Without the major partnership equity piece, is everyone gets calibrated, onboarded in the flagship. They get soaked into the culture. They have hands on them from people that have been with me for a while, so they get it. And then when they're ready, we put them in a secondary location. And from the moment we touch base, have initial contact, they know that even though that their desired location is X,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to be at Y for
Right.
3 to 6 months to kind of, drink the Kool-Aid, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term. So I think that model works. You're just going to have to deal with a layer of complexity that comes with multiple locations. And, it is what it is. A lot of people deal with it. And figure it out. I've dealt with it and kind of figured it out. Two things that I'll just bring up to keep on your radar. One is make sure that these locations are of a size that is not single doctor dependent. Right. We have discovered that the sweet spot in terms of managing profitability is a 2 doctor, 4 hygiene, 5 day a week office that does anywhere from $300,000 to $350,000 a month, and it spits out a decent amount of profit. We don't maximize profits, but it spits out a decent amount of profit. And when a doctor goes on vacation or gets married or what have you, it doesn't have to shut down. Yeah. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, if we are going to go back and talk about the RSU model, what we didn't touch upon is what level is equity at, right?
Hmm.
So your type A associate, if he's going to actually help you grow this, then his level of equity would most likely want to be at the management company,
Hmm.
which has ASA and MSA agree. And I don't want to get too granular here with the listeners, but I know
Right.
you understand what I'm talking about. Has ASA and MSA agreements with all the locations. Whereas if you're going to try to do some type of RSU model for these associates that are in these, let's call them satellite locations, you're probably going to need to end up doing sub DSOs.
Yeah.
So they have equity just at that location,
Hmm.
unless you plan on bumping them around and them helping out in other areas and stuff like that. So conversation for another day, but just wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that you had like an understanding of there's different levels to award this ownership. There's different levels to have these people buy in at. And it just really depended on what their role is going to be with you long term.
Yeah. And that makes so sense because that's that's the other thing I bumped up into is with one location, there isn't a management level. Like it's it's my location and my real estate uh, company. Like that's all we have. And so in my mind, uh, it could be both. So it's you get access to the practice level equity even as a buy-in maybe, and then
Yes.
as we scale, if you show that you're adding value, you can then have access to the management level equity, and maybe that's rolling that equity over or otherwise. But um, as with many dentists, we want to know the answers prior to getting there. And so the
Yeah.
scary part is I don't have the answers, and you kind of forget when you start your practice that you walk through this once before.
Right. Right.
And so I'm going back to the days of how scary it was that I was on the phone with a bank talking about $1 million line of credit to buy a practice that I never even thought in a million years that $1 million would be associated with my name. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
And
Right. Right.
so,
100% agree.
yeah, so I'm like, that's the scary part I'm bumping into is the unknown.
Yeah. I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's scary and it's
It's
exciting. And
exhilarating. Yeah.
yeah. And if this is truly what you want, that's why I think it's so important to, I do it daily, but it's so important to kind of go back and solidify who you're trying to become. Right. Because
Mhm.
if you kind of lose track of why you feel you were put on this earth and what your purpose is, then these conversations can get really scary and you can
Yeah.
almost kind of negative talk yourself out of it.
Hmm.
So I just think it's so important to get recalibrated on a regular basis of like, okay, this is who I'm striving to become. So, and this is part of the process. Like
Yeah.
it's cool that it's scary, but this is what I signed up for. So I'm going to continue to pursue it.
Right. Are there, with the limited knowledge you have, are there any holes that you see in my thinking that you might guide me away from, or do you feel like I'm on the right track and I need to just keep fleshing this out and having the conversations and doing the things that I'm doing?
Yeah. And again, I think you put a good caveat on it with the limited knowledge that I have. I ultimately see you striving for what I have.
Hmm.
Um, the difference is our geographical area, right? So in my market, I have 8 practices. Patients will willingly go to any of them, right? Because
Sure.
we're in an area where it's normal to drive 20 to 30 minutes to go here for an opening, go there for an opening.
Right.
Um, and the doctors are willing to, if someone calls in sick or someone needs coverage, my doctors are willing to easily do that too, geographically. It's a very, very
Right.
different phenomenon. So because of that, our ownership is all at the management company, right?
Okay.
I haven't messed around with sub DSOs and stuff like that. If I were in your market, a completely different animal, right? Where
Hmm.
15 minutes is like a lifetime away. And they're like, my patient's not going to consider going there. And I
Right.
don't want to go over there to cover. I don't know the team over there, blah, blah, blah. So the sub DSO, either through a buy-in, or through RSUs makes it from my limited knowledge and expertise on it makes way more sense.
Yeah, I agree with you. That makes sense. Well, cool. Well, there's a lot more to talk through, but I've taken enough of your time today. I really do appreciate it. It's a blessing to be able to connect with people like you and other people that have done this before. And so I'm just thankful that you're willing to share some of your time with me and help me get out of my own way. So
Yeah, I so appreciate you saying that. We're blessed to be in a pretty cool network, a lot of mutual friends and stuff, and it's awesome that we can lean on each other
yeah,
for different things and for different reasons. So, let's pause for a minute, and then maybe 3 months from now we'll get you back on the show, and we'll just kind of get an update and unpack another set of problems
yeah.
because you're up against another ceiling of complexity.
If it keeps going the way it's going in 3 months, I'm going to have a totally different problem set. So that'll be great.
Yeah. All right, brother. Great talking to you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tenori, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.